Look at any golden era chest next to a modern one. The difference hits you immediately. Old school pecs were not just big. They were thick, full from clavicle to lower insertion, built outward off a wide rib cage like slabs of armor. Three-dimensional in a way that flat benching and cable crossovers will never produce. This is not nostalgia. Something was fundamentally different about how those chests were trained, built, and displayed. The exercise selection was different. The pressing mechanics were different. The stretch work was deeper. The posture was better. And the entire definition of what counted as an impressive chest was broader than anything most modern lifters are chasing. This video breaks down 14 specific reasons why old-school bodybuilders often develop chests that look bigger, fuller, and more dramatic than what you see in most gyms today. Every reason ties back to real training differences: exercise choice, frequency, angle work, ribcage presentation, and philosophy of chest development that modern training has almost entirely abandoned. If you think you know how to build a chest, you might want to hear what the golden era guys were actually doing, because most of it has been forgotten. Reason number 1, they still took pullovers and chest expansion work seriously. If you walked into a serious gym in the 1950s, 1960s, or 1970s, you'd almost certainly see lifters doing dumbbell or barbell pullovers after their pressing work, not as a lats-only movement, as a chest expansion exercise. The idea was that deep pullover stretches, performed with moderate weight and a full range of motion, can help open up the rib cage, stretch the serratus and intercostals, and create a broader foundation for the pecs to sit on. Guys like Arnold, Reg Park, and Franco Columbu all use breathing pullovers regularly, often superset with heavy squats or pressing movements. Now, the science on whether pullovers literally expand the rib cage in adults is debatable. Most evidence suggests that true skeletal rib growth is unlikely past adolescence. But that does not mean the exercise was useless. Pullovers place the pec major and serratus anterior under a deep stretch with load, which modern hypertrophy research suggests may be a powerful stimulus for muscle growth. They also train thoracic extension and scapular movement in a way almost no modern chest exercise does. The practical result was a chest that did not just look big from the front. It looked big from the side. The rib cage sat higher, the pecs draped over a wider frame, and the overall torso had a barrel-chested quality that flat benching alone will never produce. Modern lifters have almost entirely abandoned this movement, and with it, an entire dimension of chest development that the old-school guys built into every training week. Reason number 2, weighted dips were treated like a main chest lift, not an accessory. In golden era gyms, the dip station was not something you use at the end of a workout for a burnout set. It was a primary chest builder, loaded with heavy weight, and treated with the same respect as the bench press. Marvin Eder was famous for dipping with well over 100 additional pounds. Garanda built entire chest programs around a wide grip dip performed with forward lean. For many old-school bodybuilders, the weighted dip was a movement that built lower and outer pec thickness, the kind of development that gives a chest its three-dimensional look from any angle. What makes the dip so effective for chest development is a combination of deep stretch at the bottom and a strong adduction component as you press up. When performed with a slight forward lean and elbows flared, the pec major is loaded through a massive range of motion, often deeper than what a bench press allows. Research on stretch-mediated hypertrophy supports the idea that exercises with loaded stretch position tend to produce significant muscle growth. The dip delivers exactly that for the lower chest and sternal fibers of the pec. Modern training has largely moved dips into the triceps category, or replaced them entirely with machine press variations that shorten the range of motion. The result is that many lifters today develop strong mid-range pressing strength, but miss the deep stretch stimulus that gave old-school chest their dramatic fullness and lower pec sweep. Reason number 3, they use more free weight flies in deep stretch positions. Dumbbell flies were a staple in virtually every classic chest routine, and they were performed very differently than how most people do them today. Old school lifters typically went deep, arms wide, elbows slightly bent, dumbbells lowered until the chest was fully stretched, sometimes past parallel with the shoulders. Guys like Larry Scott and Arnold treated the bottom of the fly as the most important part of the movement. The goal was not just squeezing the pecs together at the top, but getting the deepest possible stretch under load. Modern hypertrophy research has increasingly supported this approach. Studies on muscle lengthening under tension suggest that training a muscle in its stretch position can produce equal or even greater growth compared to training at shorter muscle lengths. The deep fly puts the pec major into full horizontal abduction, a position of extreme stretch where the muscle fibers are under high mechanical tension. This is a stimulus that builds thickness through the outer chest and creates that wide, full look from the front double biceps pose. Today, many lifters have replaced deep dumbbell flies with cable crossovers or machine flies that keep constant tension but limit the range of stretch. That is not necessarily wrong, but it is a trade-off. You gain tension consistency, and you lose deep stretch stimulus. Old-school bodybuilders leaned into that stretch aggressively, and it showed in the way their chests filled out from insertion to insertion, with a fullness that shallow-range movements rarely produce. Reason number 4, they press without letting machines dictate their path. When your primary pressing tools are barbells and dumbbells, your body has to stabilize every inch of the movement. There is no track, no cam, no guided path. You press the weight, and your shoulders, chest, and stabilizers figure out the most efficient route together. This was a default reality for old-school bodybuilders. Smith machines existed in some gyms by the late 1960s and 1970s, but they were not the centerpiece of chest training. Free weight pressing flat, incline, and decline was a foundation. The difference this makes for chest development is more than just stabilizer activation. When you press a barbell or dumbbells without a fixed path, the pec major has to work through a natural arc that matches the anatomy of the shoulder joint. The fibers are loaded through adduction and flexion simultaneously, in a pattern that changes slightly rep to rep based on fatigue, bar path, and body position. Machine pressing, by contrast, fixes the movement into a single groove that is great for isolating specific force curves, but it can also limit the variety of fiber recruitment across the chest. Old-school lifters did not choose free weights out of some philosophical commitment to hardcore training. They used them because that was what was available, and in doing so, they built pecs that were conditioned to produce force through every angle, not just the one angle machine dictated. Reason number 5, they bench with more chest intent and less triceps obsession. Modern bench press culture has been heavily influenced by powerlifting technique. Extreme arching, tucked elbows, leg drive, and a focus on moving the most weight possible. Those cues are excellent for competition pressing, but they shift a significant portion of the load onto the anterior deltoids and triceps, and they shorten the range of motion through the chest. Old-school bodybuilders, by and large, did not bench like powerlifters. They benched like bodybuilders. That meant a moderate grip width, controlled descent, elbows at a wider angle, and a focus on feeling the chest work, not on hitting a 1-rep max. This difference in pressing intent matters more than most lifters realize. Electromyography research shows that grip width, elbow angle, and the degree of shoulder abduction during the bench press all significantly influence how much of the load falls on the pec major versus the triceps and deltoids. A wider grip with more flare tends to increase pec activation, while a narrow grip with tucked elbows shifts emphasis to the triceps. Old-school lifters commonly press with a wider flare and a deliberate squeeze through the pecs at the top. The weight was often lighter than what a powerlifting setup could handle, but the chest did more of the work. The result was dense, full pec development driven by actual pec loading, not by moving big numbers with technique designed to minimize chest range of motion. This is one of the clearest differences between old school and modern chest training, and explains a lot about why classic physiques often had that thick, round pec look. Reason number 6, they use multi-angle chest training in the same session. A typical golden era chest workout did not consist of 4 sets of flat bench and then accessories. It was common to see a lifter move through flat pressing, incline pressing, decline pressing, dumbbell flies, and dips all in one session. The idea was to attack the chest from every angle in a single workout, making sure no part of the pec was undertrained. Vince Gironda was famous for programming chest routines that hit 6 or more angles in one session, often with short rest periods and high volume. From a muscle physiology standpoint, this approach makes sense. The pec major is a large, fan-shaped muscle with fibers running in multiple directions. The clavicular head responds best to incline and high-angle pressing. The sternal head responds best to flat and slight decline angles. The lower fibers are targeted by decline pressing and dips. Training all of these angles in the same session creates a broad hypertrophy stimulus across the entire muscle rather than hammering one portion while neglecting others. Modern training often groups exercises by chest day, but gravitates heavily toward flat pressing, with incline work sometimes treated as secondary. Decline pressing and wide grip dips are often skipped entirely. Old school lifters did not prioritize one angle over another. They cycled through all of them every session, with enough volume at each angle to stimulate the full span of the pec. That multi-angle approach is a big part of why Golden Era chests look complete. Thick from top to bottom and full from the center line out to the front delt tie-in. Reason number 7. They train chest more frequently across the week. Most serious old-school bodybuilders did not train chest once a week. They trained it 2 or even 3 times. Arnold's famous double-split routine had him hitting chest on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Reg Park's 5x5 programs often included pressing movements multiple days per week. Even outside the elite level, the standard Golden Era split involved hitting each major muscle group at least twice a week. This was the norm, not the exception. Modern training culture, particularly in the 1990s and 2000s, shifted heavily toward the once-a-week body part split. Chest on Monday, back on Tuesday, and so on. That approach allows high volume per session, but limits frequency to once every 7 days. Research on training frequency has increasingly shown that spreading volume across more sessions per week tends to produce equal or slightly better hypertrophy outcomes compared to cramming all the volume into one session. The reason is straightforward. Muscle protein synthesis after a training session peaks within the first 24 to 48 hours and then declines. Training a muscle again after it has recovered allows you to trigger that growth signal more often. Old school lifters benefited from this higher frequency, even though they were not designing their programs based on protein synthesis research. They simply trained chest more often because it worked. The cumulative effect was more total growth stimulus per week, and over months and years, that frequency advantage compounded into visibly thicker, fuller pec development. Reason number 8, they treated rib cage presentation and thoracic posture as part of chest development. Here is something that almost nobody talks about in modern chest training: the rib cage itself. Old school bodybuilders understood that a well-developed chest does not just sit on top of a flat torso. It sits on top of a rib cage, and the shape, expansion, and posture of that rib cage dramatically affect how big the chest looks. A lifter with good thoracic extension and a wide, high-set rib cage will look like they have a bigger chest than someone with rounded shoulders and a flat thoracic spine, even if both have the same amount of pec muscle mass. This was not just understood in the classic era. It was trained directly. Breathing squats paired with pullovers, thoracic extension work, overhead pressing with a full stretch, and deliberate posture practice all contributed to a presentation style that made the chest look enormous. Guys like Steve Reeves and John Grymek had chests that looked impossibly big, partly because their rib cages were wide, their shoulders were pulled back, and their thoracic spines were extended. Modern lifters often spend hours on bench variations, but ignore the structure underneath. Rounded shoulders from excessive pressing without adequate upper back work, poor thoracic mobility from sitting all day, and no deliberate ribcage expansion training all flatten the chest presentation. The pec muscle might be large, but if it is sitting on a collapsed frame, it will never look as full or dramatic as a pec sitting on a broad, upright ribcage. Old school lifters built the frame and the muscle together, and that combination is what gave their chest that unmistakable structural look. Reason number 9. They built the upper chest with more incline and guillotine-style pressing. Upper chest development was a visible priority in old-school bodybuilding. Walk through any magazine from the 1960s or 1970s, and the top competitors almost always had a strong clavicular shelf, a thick upper chest that filled the area from the collarbone down to the mid-pec line. This did not happen by accident. Incline pressing was treated as essential, not optional, and some coaches, Vince Gironda most notably, advocated for unusual pressing variations like the neck press, sometimes called a guillotine press, where the bar was lower to the upper chest, or even a neckline with a wide grip and flared elbows. The guillotine press is not for everyone. It places more stress on the shoulder joint and requires good mobility. But electromyography studies have shown that pressing with the bar path directed toward the upper chest, combined with a wider grip and greater shoulder abduction, significantly increases activation of clavicular head of the pec compared to a standard flat bench to the lower sternum. Old school lifters use these aggressive incline and high angle pressing variations consistently, and the result was visible. Their upper chests were thick, full, and clearly defined, a look that many modern lifters struggle to achieve even with dedicated incline work. Part of the reason is that modern incline pressing often uses a moderate angle and a tucked elbow technique that shifts some emphasis away from the upper pec fibers. The old school approach was more targeted, more aggressive, and more effective at building that dramatic upper chest shelf. Reason number 10, they didn't separate chest from serratus and pullover musculature the way modern lifters do. When old school bodybuilders talked about chest development, they were not just talking about the pec major. They were talking about the entire front torso, pecs, serratus anterior, intercostals, and the way those muscles connected visually into a complete upper body. The serratus, which wraps around the side of the ribcage under the armpit, was considered part of the chest picture. When a lifter hit a side chest pose, thick serratus muscles made the pecs look wider, more anchored, and more dramatic. This was not an afterthought. It was built into the training. Pullovers, dips, and overhead pressing all heavily involved the serratus anterior. Old school routines were full of these movements, which means the serratus was being trained multiple times per week as a natural part of chest and shoulder work. Modern bodybuilding has largely compartmentalized the serratus as a core or a muscle, and many lifters never train it directly or even think about it. The result is a chest that may be large in isolation, but looks disconnected from the rest of the torso. The visual flow from pec to serratus to oblique, which gave classic physiques that seamless, sculpted look, is often missing in modern builds. Old school bodybuilders did not need a special serratus day. Their exercise selection handled it automatically. The combination of pullovers, dips, and overhead work kept the serratus thick invisible, which in turn made the chest look bigger, wider, and more integrated into the whole physique. Reason number 11, they use more full body stability during chest work. When you bench press with a barbell on a flat bench, your feet are on the ground. Your back is braced, your core is engaged, and your entire body is working to stabilize the load. When you do heavy dips, your whole body is suspended and fighting gravity. When you perform standing cable work or dumbbell pullovers across a bench, your trunk has to stabilize against rotation and extension forces. Old school chest training was built around these kinds of movements, and that meant the entire body was involved in every chest workout. This matters for more than just athletic performance. When you train the chest in conjunction with full body stability demands, you develop a pressing foundation that is structurally sound. The core musculature, the serratus, the upper back, they all get trained as part of the chest session. That creates a physique where the chest does not look bolted onto a weak frame. It looks like it belongs there. Machine-based chest training removes most of the stability demand. You sit in a supported seat, press against a guided track, and the chest does the work in relative isolation. That is fine for targeted hypertrophy, but it does not build a supporting structure that makes a chest look powerful in real life or on stage. Old school lifters developed chests that looked strong because they were strong, built through movements that demanded full body coordination. That functional foundation translated directly into a visual quality of density and structural thickness that isolated machine work rarely replicates on its own. Reason number 12, they repeated the same proven chest builders for years instead of chasing novelty. Open any golden era training log, and you will see the same exercises appearing over and over. Flat barbell bench, incline dumbbell press, weighted dips, dumbbell flies, pullovers. These were the movements that old school lifters returned to year after year, progressively adding weight and volume over time. There was no obsession with finding the next secret chest exercise or rotating to a new machine variation every training cycle. The approach was simple: master a handful of proven movements and push them hard for years. This kind of exercise consistency matters for long-term hypertrophy. Progressive overload, the gradual increase in tension placed on a muscle over time, is one of the most reliable drivers of muscle growth. And progressive overload works best when you are tracking and improving on a stable set of exercises. If you constantly switch movements, you lose the ability to measure true progress, and you spend more time in the motor learning phase of each new exercise rather than the overloading phase. Old school lifters got very, very good at their core chest movements. Their technique was dialed in, their strength curves were well established, and they could push progressive overload to its limits because there was no learning curve left to interfere with intensity. Modern gym culture encourages novelty, new angles, new machines, new cable attachments every few weeks. That variety can prevent boredom, but it can also prevent the kind of deep, long-term adaptation that comes from hammering the same movements with ever-increasing loads. The classic chests were built by consistency, not creativity. Reason number 13. They pose their chests constantly, which improved control and presentation. Posing was not just something old-school bodybuilders did before a competition. It was part of their daily training. Arnold and his training partners at Gold's Gym famously practiced poses between sets, after workouts, and at home in the mirror. Chest poses, the side chest, the most muscular, the front double biceps, were rehearsed hundreds of times per week. This constant practice did more than prepare them for the stage. It built an extraordinary level of mind-muscle connection and voluntary control over the pec muscles. The ability to flex and present the chest well has a direct impact on how big the chest appears, both on stage and in everyday posture. A lifter who can fully contract the pecs, spread the chest, and control the upper and lower portions independently will always look like they have a bigger chest than someone with the same muscle mass, but poor control. Posing also reinforces good thoracic posture. Chest up, shoulders back, rib cage expanded, which further enhances the visual impression of size. Modern recreational lifters almost never practice posing unless they are preparing for a show. The result is that many well-built lifters cannot actually display their chest development effectively. They have the mass, but not the presentation. Old-school bodybuilders understood that building a muscle and showing a muscle were two sides of the same coin. Their chests looked bigger in part because they had spent thousands of hours learning exactly how to present them. That level of control cannot be replicated by training alone. Reason number 14. They defined a bigger chest differently than most lifters today. This is the reason that ties everything else together. When an old-school bodybuilder said he wanted a bigger chest, he did not just mean more pec mass. He meant a wider rib cage, a thicker upper chest, visible serratus, strong intercostals, a chest that looked massive from the side, not just the front, a torso that expanded and flared when he hit a vacuum or a side chest pose. The definition of chest development was broader, more structural, and more connected to overall torso presentation than it is for most lifters today. Modern chest training tends to focus narrowly on the pec major, specifically the sternal head, and measures progress primarily by bench press numbers or chest circumference. That is not wrong, but it leaves out a lot. The old school definition included the frame, the posture, the surrounding musculature, and the ability to display the chest in multiple poses. That broader definition drove a broader approach to training. Pullovers for ribcage work, dips for lower pec sweep, incline pressing for clavicular shelf, posing for presentation, and serratus work for visual integration. Every reason in this video comes back to this one idea. Old school bodybuilders often had bigger looking chests because they were building more than just a muscle. They were building a structure, a chest complex that included the rib cage, the serratus, the posture, and the pressing strength to back it all up. If you want a chest that looks impressive from every angle, not just under a barbell, that old school definition is worth revisiting. That is 14 reasons, not opinions, not nostalgia, not guesswork. 14 real differences in how old school bodybuilders trained, pressed, stretched, posed, and thought about chest development. The movements were deeper. The frequency was higher. The definition was broader, and the results spoke for themselves every time those guys stepped on stage and hit a side chest pose. If even 2 or 3 of these reasons made you rethink how you train chest, you're already ahead of most lifters in any modern gym. Now, put it to work. If this video gave you something useful, hit the like button. It takes 1 second, and it helps this channel reach more lifters who actually care about building a real physique. Subscribe if you're not already, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next one.